Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. And I'm Todd DeVoe, and I've been involved in responding to disasters and emergencies, for a long time now, since 1989. And in 1998, I started my journey in the field of emergency management while I was working in EMS. And I started out doing EMS logistics. And if I fell in love with emergency management, but since then, I became a educator in the post-secondary level, and learning and sharing what I've learned is a passion for me. So welcome to Business Continuity Today, where we will continue to learn together. Today, we're talking about becoming that trusted advisor. See, at times, I use the term as emergency management, business continuity, crisis management, and disaster management. I use those interchangeably. And, maybe I shouldn't, but this is how it is. And I think each role has like a different kind of connotation. However, there's one thing that's constant. That at each level, each role, decisions are being made by members of the executive team. So let's explore crisis management for a moment. And then we'll discuss, how you can become a trusted advisor for the C-suite. See, the idea of crisis management tends to be used in the private sector more often than the idea of crisis management in the public sector. A little connotation in the words, crisis management sometimes deals with public relations issues and things like this. And I also think they don't use emergency management necessarily a lot of times, because I think if you think of emergencies and disaster management, it's a larger scale disaster. The public sector has the larger role, takes the lead. But however, not all crisis events are large, and it's important to get a better understanding of what this means and how it was impacted by it. See, crisis management is also more strategically oriented. In some cases, the event only impacts a small portion of the organization, right? However, a wrong decision on wrong wording and how things are handled, the situation can impact the entire company. So the principal decision maker in this cases are the high level, commonly known as the C-suite, or where the CSO, the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, the CEO, the CHR all kind of sit. And then sometimes now we can even call it the Chief Resilient Officer or the CRO, right? Where their offices are located. The C-suite tends to focus on those long-term impacts of events. So if business continuity managers are truly to be trusted advisors to the senior officials, it is essential that we understand how we can support crisis management. So in The Politics of Crisis Management, Public Leaders Under Pressure by Erjan Borin, and he identifies 5 strategic leadership tasks and that public officials or company officials must perform in a crisis. Starts off with making sense, or sense making. It's collecting and processing the information that allows the dedication of the detection of an emergent crisis that goes and understanding the significance. In that case, once you have that going on, decision making, determining the response strategy and coordinating the implementation of the strategy. So again, it goes back to the strategic level, right? It's not deep down into the weeds of how things are happening. And meaning making, right? And that's developing the narrative that resonates with the public and the responders. Accounting, right? Explaining to the public what was done to prevent and manage this crisis. And then learning, analyzing the cause and response to the crisis and implementing corrective action. So Lucian Canton argues that if we examine these 5 tasks, we find that they are identical to tasks being performed by emergency managers. While the scope and the audience may vary, we have skills to support strategic crisis management. And since it is an essential part of emergency response, the collection of information, the facilitation, and decision-making at the strategic development. See, when you're up at that level, emergency management really becomes that high level looking at that from the 30,000 foot, right? Not into the weeds of where things are going. And you have to understand that the CEOs and the C-suite people need to be there, right? If they get into the weeds and stuff, they can't make those strategic decisions. So you have to really help them get there and walk through that process. We already have in place protocols for assisting the response to identifying the corrective answers. And there are 2 areas that may give us pause for developing a narrative and accounting to the public, both involve crisis communications and symbolism. There are actions of part of the senior officials that can have negative and positive impacts. So consider the example of statements and actions made by the CEO of British Petroleum during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The BP oil CEO's name's Tony Hayward, and his message came out, and he was talking to people, and he goes, I just want to get back, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, I just want to get back to the life that I had. This had negative consequences for both him and the organization and his longevity. His tenure ended on October 1st, 2010. He was replaced by Bob Dooley following that Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Just that simple mistake. The idea of going out there and just saying, I just want to go back to my own life, cost him his job. So it goes into the idea of reputation management, and it's one of the areas in which we have some responsibility under NFP 1600, and we certainly can provide data to support this accountability. See, strategic crisis management may seem a bit removed from the normal responsibilities that we have, but it's a logical extension of what we do. See, we certainly have the skill set to support it. We frequently find ourselves supporting and borrowing other disciplines, such as security, risk management, crisis management, all various different areas here. And it's kind of what we do as generalists, right? So strategic management, right, during the crisis is no different in any area that we've focused on before, right? And so we've been really talking about this here at Business Continuity today for a bit, right? And the idea of leadership and what it means. So now there are 8 steps that will help you move from that person in the office next to the coffee maker to a valued member of the organization. Now, it's key that you need to start today, right? Before the crisis hits. You need to make yourself part of the inner circle and the trusted circle. Now, these aren't the only things that you can do, but these are the 8 that I came across and really kind of been using for a bit. You have to demonstrate low levels of self-orientation. That is, don't sell it for yourself, right? You have to be able to step outside of what is good for you, right? But look at what's good for the organization. And what's good for the organization is good for the C-suite. You build trust with C-suite by showing them that you put them first, right? Not yourself. Sounds easy, right? But it's actually incredibly hard because it really requires discipline. After all, it's human nature to worry about where you sit in the organization and about yourselves before anybody else. But as an emergency manager, business continuity manager, crisis manager, right? You have to think about the organization first. Consistently maintaining low levels of self-orientation is what makes out the advisors, right? The CEO trustful long-term. Then you're going to understand that they're thinking about the CEO, you're thinking about what their issues are and how to make them succeed in an event rather than your own ladder climbing. Ask questions to understand why. So the trusted advisor, right? That's my favorite question actually, is why, right? As a trusted advisor, it's great way to paraphrase and reassure any nervous agency who's the CEO, right? Ask that question of why, what's going on. You have to keep asking the question, understand why the CEO is asking you to do what they're asking you, and do it in a delicate way, right? Not like in that 3-year-old obstinate way, like, why do I have to do this, right? It's what better understanding. Asking that question, the why and the how. It's summed up another of my favorite phases that's more valuable and prudent in this idea is problem definition and then problem solution, right? You might want to come up with different ways to give solutions, and we can say that give the option and do it in a non-controversial way, right? Or confrontational way, I should say. The role is to help the C-suite understand so they can decide. George Bush came out one time and says, I am the decider, and people gave him a lot of crap for that. But the idea is that he had different opinions and decisions coming his way, and he would make the decision based upon what he felt was best at the time. So this is what we should do as a trusted advisor, is be able to give various different solutions, right, after you have the problem defined. And the beauty is simply model, right? Build those models for the executive to look at and to decide. To develop the confidence to admit that you don't know, right? When the questions are asked, sometimes you just have to say, I don't know. And it's okay, right? But the other side of it is, I'm going to find out, right? So don't just leave it as I don't know, right? Leave it as I don't know right now, but I'll do the research and find out and come back to you and come back to them with that research, right? And again, that goes back into the idea of building that model for the decision making. Be generous be generous. Be generous with your knowledge, right? There are people out there who claim to be thought leaders, right? And it's very unlikely that any secret information that makes it better than the person who comes before you or after you. What it is, instead, you become that trusted leader or that trusted insider, that trusted advisor by being generous with what you know and sharing this information. Don't hold things close to your vest in the fear that you're going to lose your position or your job, right? It's kind of interesting that Titan HST, we do this by sharing our monthly drill reminders out with people who are with our clients, right? And it's a neat newsletter. It goes out there and it gives tips and tricks on how to do things and it's sharing knowledge. And I really think it's important that to become that trusted advisor, you have to share that knowledge. And I close that loop for the executive team. The trust develops through spending time together. That means phone communication beats emails, face-to-face beats phone, and it's always better to be on the side of over communication rather than less, right? Let them know you're working on that document that they asked for you to write, and when you think of it, you'll send it right over. Don't wait for it to be a surprise, and get it there earlier, right? If you say that it's going to take you 3 days to get it there in 2. Right. And then make your CEO understand and assume that be able to have powers of telepathy, right? That know what they want to know next. Think about, Radar, if I'm going to age myself here, in MASH, right? He's got his nickname Radar O'Reilly, because he knew what was going to come before it was asked. He had the stuff ready for the colonel. You build reliability over time. Build your trust by doing what you say you'll do. Create opportunities to deliver on your promise, and say something. You'll send something at 9 a.m. Do it. Commit to it. I'll make sure it's done by 9 a.m. One of the things that we learned in the military is if you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. Right. The other side of it too is actively listen. One of the hardest skills is to develop that active listening. This means listening out for what isn't being said by the client. My friend Brian, he is really good at as what we call reading between lines. Sometimes too good, maybe, right? Kind of good. What I mean by that is sometimes there are things that aren't there that he thinks are there. But at the other end of the day, he's able to really listen between those lines and understand what's going on and really serve his clients better. And it's amazing. I've learned a lot on watching what Brian does as far as serving his clients and becoming that trusted advisor. And I think that's important. He understands their tone. He understands their body language. He understands what things need to be rushed and done. He understands what's things that can be, put the brakes on and bring back to a slower, methodical process, right? And so being able to read people like that, I think, is critical. And Brian does a great job, and I learned a lot from him from doing that. So active listening is key and critical to becoming that trusted advisor. Now, some of these points may sound obvious. When we're written down, it may seem easy enough, but it's amazing how it's actually hard to put these things into behavior and day out. Well, what I'd like to hear is, what would you like to add to that list? And please put it in the comments down here what you'd like to add to the list. Well, thank you, everybody, for being with us today. And visit Titan HST for all your communication needs. And remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player, or I should say subscribe to us on your favorite podcast player. Please give us a 5-star rating. It would really help out. Share this with your friends, family, and colleagues. And follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. And join us next week. Until then, stay safe and stay hydrated.